Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here, doing my review for episode 4 of The Last of Us, Please to Hold My Hand. Still feel like that's a weird title when it could have literally just been Please Hold My Hand, but I like the episode, so I don't care about the title very much. There will be spoilers in the second half that involve a lot of the big connections and story beats of the game, so when we get to that, I will let you guys know, but as far as the first chunk of this, it will be spoiler-free, well, as far as the game is concerned, spoiler-free, but I will be going through the whole episode. Minor connections here and there, but nothing that's like super crazy big story beats. Starting from the beginning, I love what they did with Joel and Ellie, with this only being 9 episodes and not like the 12 hours they have for the game, if not more. I like how they handled their relationship and them definitely this being the like super bonding episode, which I think they have some very good potential with that from some stuff which I'll have to talk about spoiler wise, but them doing it in the game was way down the line. Much further down the line, but them doing it early in the show could also lead to some really good stuff later on, because Joel in this is definitely a lighter character compared to the game. He's much rougher, much meaner. They get to a little bit of that where they like they have Ellie question like, did you kill innocent people? That was definitely the portion of the game where that starts to truly come out, like how good is Joel of a character. Like he was obviously a dad who lost his daughter. He's like the tough guy, but has he done things that are just plain bad? And clearly, when someone asks you, did you kill anyone innocent? You can't pause. You just can't. You can't go, like, yes, the answer is yes then. So they obviously kind of touched on that a little bit with kind of the darker side of his character. They get more information, or they give more information on Tommy and how, things kind of played out a little bit after Sarah's death and like where they went from there, and joining up with the Fireflies for a little bit, meeting Tess, things like that. It's like, okay, we get a lot of exposition there, and I thought that was pretty cool. They do some great stuff as far as, nerds like myself who are familiar with the game. The whole car scene was like one-to-one recreation, pulling out the tape, being like, this make you feel nostalgic. This was before my time. All of that was like one-to-one. The comic, or not the comic, but the porno mag and stuff like that. Actually, that might have been the one thing that was missing, was I think she reads comics during that scene as well. So that's probably like the one thing that was missing out of that whole sequence, and the fact that I think in the game it's also writing. But they have all the jokes, why this page is sticky, like I'm just having with you, all that stuff was from the game. I really love that. The pun book making it into the show, fantastic. That's also from the game, so I really enjoyed that. I think the cut of her falling asleep, I don't think they make the joke in the game where it's like, we woke up really early or anything like that, but like they do that cut where she falls asleep. So that was a cool way to kind of keep that little reference in there, the passage of time. And this is definitely the episode where I was like, okay, they have to get from point A to point B, the whole point of in the game. And I actually, yeah, they do it because it's in the trailers. So in the game they do it really by seasons, and so far they haven't really touched on that as much, where it's like it's spring, summer, fall, anything like that. They haven't really touched on it. I know that we get to winter, but I'm curious if they just do that where it's based on the location. Like maybe it's just the same time, they're just going across the country, so it's like it's technically winter, but they started in a place that was warm and now they're going somewhere cold. But they're in like Kansas, and I'm pretty sure it snows in Kansas. So I don't think that's really what they're doing. I think it will just be an actual passage of time when we get to the winter segment. So I'm curious how that's going to end up panning out. But this was definitely like the travel episode where they could do the montage stuff, and they're just kind of going really far. So it's like, all right, they've traveled an indiscriminate amount of distance, and then now they've gone to a new location. And I like the way they handled that, doing the stuff where they go to sleep in the forest, and it's like it's way too remote for there to be any clickers or anything like that out here. So we don't even have to worry about the infected, but we can't make a fire because we have to worry about people. And that was obviously a reference to really everything that's coming up in this episode, and I would assume in the next episode as well, where once they get to Kansas, and it's Pittsburgh in the game, but they get to Kansas and it's like that guy's not injured. They get into a fight, take out, I think it's only like 3 people. In the game it was like it feels like you fight 1 million people, because that whole scene is just very intense. But in the show it's like, all right, he took out like a couple people. The young dude kind of snuck up on him at the end. Ellie shoots that guy, and then it's like, all right, that was an intense moment. They don't talk about it there, but they talk about it later. And Ellie does exactly what Joel does, where it was like she just helped him kill a dude. Like, she shoots him to save Joel, and then he's like, go back in the hole. He kills the guy, and then she kind of sniffs. She kind of wipes her face a little bit and is like, I got supplies, I got this, like, I'm good, I'm ready to go. And she kind of just ignores it. And then it's like, all right, we got to get out of here because we just got attacked. And so they have their moment later to talk about it. But in that moment, she ignores it. And he's like, yeah, it's time to ignore it. But we'll talk about this later. And so, they do get to that. But I thought it was cool. I like the way they handled it. They kind of make a reference to the second game because they call out the dudes now. I think it was like Brian or whatever. In The Last of Us Part 2, the game, they do that a lot because they humanize the characters. That's just a huge part of the story, which obviously I won't spoil. But they do it where, like, if you kill people, every once in a while they'll shout out the person's actual name, like, oh man, they killed this person. Everyone's favorite joke, like people my age, there's one character where they do it and it's like Kevin, and everyone thinks of Home Alone. So I would have loved it if they did that. It was just like Kevin. That would have made me laugh. But I think they were like, if we do that, people are just gonna laugh. It's gonna be the Home Alone thing. But they should have done it. I personally, I would have been like, just slip it, just make it, just yell, have them yell Kevin, just throw in, get us the Home Alone reference. But they didn't do that. I do believe it was like Brian or something like that. So they end up killing those guys. Of course, the guy who snuck up on Joel is about to kill him. Once it's like, oh, he gets shot and he's wounded, it's like, hey, we're done fighting, like basically he was like, my mom's off the road, like we can get like some cookies and some stuff, like it's fine, please don't kill me. And of course he gets killed. And so then it's very intense. And then we have the leader of the Kansas City group. Now in the game, it is these are NPC bad guys moment ever. They have no faces, they have no names. It is just, you are in this part of the town, this is the bad part of town, get out. And then there's Sam and Henry. That's the story. Sam and Henry, bad guys. That's it. That's all there is to it. And they're loaded bad guys. Just like kind of in this episode, it was like they have all the materials, all the equipment they need to make sure they keep that city like kind of tight and locked down for themselves. So in this, they humanize the characters, and that was the one thing. And I saw that, I think pretty much everyone, especially people that like the game, I should watch a review of someone that hasn't seen the game or hasn't played the game. But everyone pretty much had the same consensus where it was like, like the last episode, they changed a ton of stuff and it was perfectly fine. It was a great episode, actually. This episode, they changed a much smaller thing, which was just giving the people names and faces and their own story. And it was like, I don't like it as much already. I don't like it as much. And I think it was just the way they did it. For one, and I will not remember the character's name because I'm bad at names. For one, though, she doesn't seem like the greatest leader ever. She's clearly not a good leader in terms of logic over revenge, because they have that moment where it's like, hey, there's this thing underground, like her second in command, who is Tommy from the games, by the way, that the actor, Jeffrey Pierce, that is Tommy from the game. And he does not change his voice. That is his actual voice. I didn't realize that before, but as soon as he spoke, I was like, oh, he just used his actual voice in the game. Like that is Tommy. But he falls in line. Like he's like, all right, bad idea. We shouldn't probably just seal the building up and go after, Sam and Henry. But okay, that's what you said, so that's what we're gonna do. I didn't like it as much because I was like, all right, I don't see her as like the most effective leader. I don't really know what her stance truly is, aside from the fact that her doing that was definitely like, she's on a rampage for her own revenge. Like her story right now is revenge. And the other weird thing about that is, I swear this is how I felt, and I would love to know if other people felt this way. It feels like we're 3/4 into her story, and they gave like everything else in the span of like 2 sentences, because so much stuff happened with what she talked about with her doctor that made no sense to me, where I'm like, okay, this is the story of these people. Because at first it was just like, oh crap, that's the quarantine zone. It's like, it's effed up. What happened to Fedra? There's no Fedra there. Well, we have the Kansas City group. They took over. So they fought Fedra. They won against Fedra. They now take over. They took over. Before that, though, her brother got ratted out. So she obviously had like a group of people that were trying to splinter off. Her brother got ratted out by Sam and Henry. He got captured. He got killed. She wants revenge against Sam and Henry. They killed all of Fedra. Somehow the doctor was involved in some way, shape, or form, which we aren't 100% aware of, because there were like no other traitors. It was just the doctor, and then she killed him. And then they're still looking for Sam and Henry. That's like 7 things. You could kind of put some of those together, but that was at least, even if you put some stuff together, we'll just say it was 4 things. 4 giant things. They fought Fedra. Her brother died. They beat Fedra. They're looking for Sam and Henry's because they're traitors. That's 4 things in 2 sentences, And all of that stuff, I was like, there's no way that was just like, boop, it happened. Obviously, they were leading up to that at some point. But the way they do it is like, everyone feels comfortable in their roles. Like, she's the leader, everyone seems to follow behind her. She's still not 100% there, but she's clearly the leader. Like, people fall in line and stuff. But it feels like what they explained in like those couple of sentences would have taken weeks to do. And they could easily do it because obviously at some point it was before the day happens and then it's the day after. So obviously at some point it only takes that one day and then everything's different. They could easily explain that in the next episode where it was like, we did all that stuff happened and that was like 2 or 3 days ago. But the thing that is in my head is like, all right, they did all that stuff. They took over Fedra, all these things. I still have to wonder, what's the deal with the doctor? How did she know that he was connected to Sam and Henry? How long have they been looking for Sam and Henry? How long ago did their brother get killed? How long ago did they actually take over the Fedra quarantine zone? There's a bunch of stuff that happened. And because of the way they explained it, where it was like they gave 2 sentences, like, I know that, you know, somehow the doctor could have potentially had information on where Sam and Henry were. Maybe he was kind of meeting up with them, giving them supplies or leaving supplies somewhere. Maybe, you know, they didn't explain it. It could have been something as simple as that, where she realized like, oh, someone's sneaking out extra supplies. They found out it was the doctor. Where's Sam and Henry? Why did Sam or at the very least Henry, because I think Henry was the older of the brothers. Why did he give up her brother? Why didn't he want Fedra to take over? Like, there's a bunch of stuff in that story that could have been its own episode. And even that one episode would have to be just like the last one, where it was like, this is like day 1 of the quarantine, or, you know, at the very least, like, here's when this happened. And it took like a week or 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks, for all of that stuff to happen. And then they were like, here's 2 sentences. And now we keep going. And for me, I was like, it feels like that was a lot of stuff to have happen. And like I said, it could have been like right before Joel and Ellie got there. But it feels like it's been a long time. So they'll probably explain that they've been hiding in the city for days or something like that. But I was like, I feel like they put 2 sentences in and a million things happened in that. And I'm still a little confused because there's not a single Fedra person left over. It was just the doctor. It wasn't like we could go to this person, maybe they'll have the information. It was like just the doctor, the only traitor, and then Sam and Henry. And I was like, that feels weird. So they killed off all the Fedra people. All of them are dead. And somehow Sam and Henry are like the bad guys on the run because they betrayed her brother. But that happened before they killed all the Fedra people. So they've been looking for them for, you know, like I said, how long? So it was just very interesting because I'm like, that feels like a boatload of stuff that happened. And they shrunk that junk down to 2 sentences. And I'm like, so how, you know, like my main thing was like, well, when did that happen? And how long have they been looking for Sam and Henry? If they went through like a whole war with Fedra taking over and all this other stuff, like there was a million things that happened and they shrunk it down to 2 sentences. And I was like, I feel like I need more of an explanation because I felt like I was kind of lost. Like we were, like I said, 3/4 into her story and we were just thrown in like we should have known every moment that happened, but they were going through the dialogue and giving it. And I was still just like, it feels weird that we just learned that. And that feels like 5 things that happened at one time. So I felt weird about it because I was like, it seems oddly vague. Like there's a lot of stuff I kind of need like pinpoint timing on because it feels so weird, but they might explain it more in the next episode. They might not. It might just be, look, it is what it is. And we're moving on Sam and Henry. So we'll see what happens with that. But I was definitely just like, all right, I'm not the biggest fan of the character because I feel like I'm not attached to her. Like, you know, she lost her brother. Her whole thing is just revenge right now. It's revenge over logic. And I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that personally. Well, as of now, I don't really like it too much because it doesn't lead to anything super exciting. Maybe a screw up that leads to a cool action sequence. That's about the most I can think of. Maybe her second in command betrays her, kind of that classic deal. Like, you know, you didn't even care. You didn't want to let the people know. They could do that. They might not even have time. It's The Last of Us. They might be like, they would have gotten there if we had like another 7 or 8 days, but you know, crazy things happen. 50 people get killed at one time. It's like, you know, could have had those conversations, but your face was eaten off. My bad. And then we move on. That could easily happen where it's like, we could get some answers or we could just kill them anyway. Because everyone's dying. Like, let's face it. All the bad guys, like, they are the bad guys. They're, you know, she's the good guy in her story. Sam or Henry, I guess, ratted out her brother. They're the villains of her story. But, like, she's the bad guy of our story. It's like, sorry, you gotta go. And everybody with you gotta go, too. So, monster's gonna get released. They're gonna be eaten. It'll be fine. They'll be gone. That's just what I expect. I could be totally wrong. But I highly doubt it. But I am looking forward to the next episode, which is Friday, because apparently the Super Bowl is on Sunday. I didn't know that. Obviously, I don't like sports. I genuinely had no idea. And I was like, oh, Super Bowl, it must be in a couple of weeks. And then I was like, why is the episode on Friday? And it's like, I watched the review and they're like, it's a Super Bowl. And I was like, oh, it's Sunday. It's on Sunday. So obviously I don't keep up with sports. But next episode is much sooner. And that's actually really cool, because I think these are 2 episodes that really do go well together. Kind of like the first 2 episodes, which the first episode technically was 2 episodes. So it was going to be 10 episodes for the season. And then they put those 2 episodes, which were originally going to be 1 and 2, they put them together into 1 episode. And I feel like this definitely could have benefited from that, just because of the way it was handled. And of course, Sam and Henry not showing up until the end, that's more of a thing on the side of, I think, people that played the game. We got 5 episodes left. This was the second shortest episode, but we do have 5 episodes left. They could easily make it work, but this was definitely the one where I was like, oh crap. I thought at least Sam and Henry were going to be a big part of the episode. They don't even show up until the end. And it's like, there's a decent bit of story with them, which they could easily do in 1 episode if they want to. But that's not really the problem. It's not their story that's an issue. It's like, there's a lot of other stuff that happens. So we'll see what happens, but really enjoyed the episode. I mean, I feel like oddly enough, there's not too much to really say outside of, as far as spoilers for the main game, because really the big thing was the new people. That was the biggest difference. Sam and Henry, we don't see them until the end of this episode, so I can't really speak on whether or not they changed too much of their characters. From the promo, we see that Sam actually uses sign language, so he's deaf. That's a difference from the game, and I think they may have done that on purpose, because they could easily utilize that for an amazing horror sequence where like he has to like feel the ground. It could be like him and Ellie trying to survive, so she's not as experienced. He has to like feel like the ground rumbling to see when something's coming at him, stuff like that. They could easily do that, and I feel like that's partially why they did it, because otherwise it's like, you don't really need to do that. You just have the kid be a kid like he is in the game. But I'm like, I feel like they made that change to add some epic horror. I'm hoping, because you can easily do it, like you cut the sound and it's like all you hear, obviously the classic thing where it's just ringing but you can't really hear anything, everything's super muffled. It could be a great horror sequence. I hope that's why they did that. Otherwise it was like, maybe they just got a kid that was just perfect for the role and he just happens to be deaf. That could be it as well. But I almost feel like it's intentional. I feel like there's no way they made him deaf and they weren't like, what if we do a horror scene based on him not being able to hear? There's just no way. So that's what I'm hoping for in the episode. But I'm looking forward to the next one. Would love to know your thoughts on this episode and things that were changed, not changed, kind of moved around, stuff like that. Like I said, I feel like there isn't too much to really talk about spoiler wise, because everything really was based on the fact that the enemies are just the enemies in the game. And in this, they have an actual story. If they conclude that in the very next episode, I mean, I guess they have the time. It's not a game. All that time is just straight up exposition / dialogue. It's not the same as the game. So they could easily do it all in 1 episode, but it does feel a little weird considering game-wise, how much time you spend with Sam and Henry. So they could go into the next 2 episodes, but that feels weird too. So it's like, would they wrap up their story, send them, kind of send them on their way? I just don't know. It's hard to tell. Like, how do they have these characters stick around in the story without taking too much time from some really big plot points coming up in the next couple episodes? We do have 5 more to go. They could do it all in the next one and then have 4 more to go, because they've moved so much stuff around that I feel like the next couple of big story beats is like, I think there's one story beat, obviously spoiler wise, but there's one story beat that I feel like could easily take up a whole episode, or at least half, depending on how they want to tell it. But for now, I'm still enjoying the show, so I'm not super worried. Next episode, I think, will be the determining factor, especially for people like me who've played the game, where we're kind of like, I hope they have enough time to really, kind of give appreciation to the big story beats that are coming up. So that's really like the one worry, just because of this episode, that they could easily switch. Once again, this is the second shortest episode of the whole season, so we'll have more time. We'll have more time, and I have faith for sure. I'm sure I'll like it either way. It'll just be like, oh, that was slightly jarring if they do something shorter or whatever. But I think we'll be fine. I think this was clearly like that episode after you come off like a high peak. It's the same as like a lot of shows where like, holy crap, that season was like, they did this thing and it ended in like an epic culmination, and then it was like, okay, well now we have to do like basically a brand new start to the series. It was kind of like that, except it wasn't a whole new start to the series. It was just, here's a new chunk of the story. And so it's kind of, it has to ramp up a little bit. So we'll see where it ends up by the end of the next episode. But we'd love to know your thoughts on this one. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.